This afternoon, we have a fabulous guest, Dr. Emily Burns. Emily is a wildlife biologist who founded a program right here in southern Arizona, where IDA is headquartered, for the Sky Island Alliance. The program tracks wildlife activity along migration routes across the US-Mexico border, where wall construction is planned. And Emily is here today to explore how frequently mammals move in the dark while the rest of us are usually still. I'm just going to quickly add that Emily is just one half of a dynamic conservation duo. She is the spouse of our very own Ruskin Hartley, IDA's executive director. And Emily has been a great friend to IDA and to me personally in my role as senior director of outreach. Emily has offered her expertise in biology and helped us think deeply about how we position wildlife protection as an important element of protecting the night from light pollution. So Emily, I want to just start by saying thank you for being such a great friend to IDA and to our work. And I'm so pleased to be here with you today.
Well, it's fabulous to be here as well. And I am really excited to talk about nocturnal wildlife. It's become somewhat of a personal and professional obsession, especially over the last year. And I'm going to take you on a tour through that obsession over the next few minutes.
Can't wait. Okay, well, I'll just let you take it away whenever you're ready.
Okay. When my family moved to the Sonoran Desert last year, I knew that we were coming to a place where we were going to be having wildlife encounters like we hadn't had before. The Sonoran Desert in northern Mexico and southern Arizona is a mixing ground of tropical species moving up from Central America and down from the temperate North America. It's this amazing mixing place, and for that reason, there are more species of plants and animals here than anywhere else in inland North America. So as soon as we got to the desert, I just wanted to see the animals running around the garden, trying to find evidence of what creatures might be roaming around. And I asked some friends about what the best way would be to see wildlife even in our garden. And they very kindly pointed out the obvious and said, well, if you put out water in the desert, animals will come. And sure enough, they did. We put out a simple bowl of water outside of our family room window. And pretty soon we saw a parade of desert cottontails, many kinds of birds, quail, we had mourning doves, and it was fabulous. My family has been charmed by the animals coming by this water bowl from sunrise to sunset every day. But I knew from reading the literature and working with Sky Island Alliance in this region that there were many other animals that are likely present in our garden, but I wasn't seeing them. My suspicion was confirmed one morning after a monsoon rain in August last year, when the heavy rains had washed a bunch of sand and sediment into the water bowl. I went out there to clean it out and to refill it, and I saw this paw print in the bottom of the bowl. And I said, that's not an animal that I've been seeing in the garden. It's not one I've been seeing out of the window or as we hike around. And I was so curious to know what it was. Well, my parents were visiting at the time, and my dad helped me set up a wildlife camera right by the water bowl. And after a few days of waiting, finally, I remember my dad was checking the camera and he said, bingo. And this is what we found. The amazing animal that had left those footprints was an American badger. And here he is dipping his bip in the water bowl. Look at his cute face. He's got these amazing claws for digging, and it's an animal that comes out almost always at night. We continued taking videos. We saw a coyote. Here's a bobcat. Javelina, cousins of pigs that live here in the Southwest. So many skunks. Many, many rodents came out at night. Oh, and even our desert blonde tarantula was caught on our video cameras. And every day, when night would transition to daylight and twilight would begin, we would see some of the same animals continue to be present, but many of the species would change, and we'd see different animals during the day. And this has been endlessly fascinating to me. One of my favorite things to do when I wake up in the morning is check which animals came by our water during the night to see who the visitors were. And I can tell you 9 months later and 4 cameras now, we're getting quite a good picture of just how many species are coming through the desert while we're sleeping in our beds. Now, the Sonoran Desert is known for many nocturnal creatures that are really amazing. Bats in particular, some are resident here and some are migrating through. This is the lesser long-nosed bat. It's a remarkable bat that migrates from Mexico up into this region, pollinating the cactus as it goes. We wouldn't have our amazing saguaro forests without the bats that help pollinate and allow these cactus to reproduce. They also pollinate the agave. So for the grown-ups out there that love their tequila and mezcal, we really have to hand it to our nocturnal bats that are helping make sure that those plants are available for the production of those spirits. The Sonoran Desert also has scorpion, a very different kind of animal, but this one is such a fun one to find at night. If you have a UV light and are very careful out in your garden, you actually can locate them and they glow white under UV light, which is really fun. So one of the things that I've really learned just with my own curiosity and cameras in our garden is the importance of the night sky, the importance of darkness, because that is the time when so many animals are adapted to come out, to be looking for water, for food, for mates. And the dark sky is something that the animals are very adapted to that have these nocturnal habits. Many of them have acute senses of smell. They have very large eyes to take in more light. And it's an amazing adaptation here in the Sonoran Desert where the temperatures are very warm, especially in the summer, for animals to come out at the coolest part of the 24-hour cycle, which is at night. Now, moving at a broader regional scale, wildlife move through these deserts, but many of them are actually moving between the mountaintops here in the Sonoran Desert. And the animals that are doing that are moving between what we call sky islands. The mountains are called sky islands because they are forested habitats on the mountaintops that are separated by these desert seas, if you will. And we, with Skyland Alliance and our volunteers, have been studying the movement of wildlife species throughout this region for many decades. And recently, we've turned our attention to the US-Mexico border, a place that has foothills to several mountain ranges that are very rugged and wild. They're almost not developed at all. And they're amazing corridors for species, especially terrestrial mammals that are moving from Mexico to the United States and back south again. Here's a picture of that grassland habitat, which is the next habitat you find as you move up into the mountains out of the desert. Beautiful rolling grasslands. You can see an agave stalk on the right-hand side of the screen. And you may notice that there's a wall along the left side. Continuing this tour up into these mountains at the border, you get into the oak woodlands. And the oak woodlands is the focus of our research right now with Sky Island Alliance at the border. We are located in the southeastern corner of the state. And from where I'm standing, where I took this photograph across the rolling oak woodlands into the mountains, you're staring at Mexico. And this is a really incredibly important wildlife crossroads where many animals are moving back and forth. This is a place where jaguar are moving into the United States and mountain lion are moving south. We are very interested in understanding the total diversity of animals living in this region because border wall construction is planned to put a 30-foot steel wall right where that red line is in this view. Now, border construction in this particular mountain range hasn't started yet, but it's poised to happen at any point. And currently, there's no environmental studies being done by the US government to look at the impacts to wildlife species and other aspects of the environment here in this region. Because of Sky Island Alliance's deep history in caring for and studying animals, we decided it was time for us to carefully document the diversity of life in this region and monitor the impacts of border wall construction if it is built here. Just to give you a sense of what border wall looks like at the southern boundary of the United States, here's a stretch of border wall just to the west of the photograph that I showed you. This is a section of border wall that was built in the 90s, and actually it's only half the height of the new border wall that is planned for the entire southern US. So our response to this serious environmental threat is to turn to conservation science. And one of the most amazing tools that we have are motion-triggered and heat-triggered cameras that can do the work for us. We can deploy these cameras in the field, and they document triggers, any kind of motion or heat signature that goes by the camera 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You can see mounted on this oak tree, our camera that's been banded to the tree. And we began to install these cameras at the end of February. And by mid-March, all of our cameras in the US were installed. And we're really excited. As we speak right now, cameras are going onto property in the south of the border. So here's an example of two photographs taken from the same camera at the same vantage point, with the top photo being what the wildlife photo looks like at night. In the day. Now, this photograph taken during the day was actually triggered by cattle. You can see on the left side of the photo. And in the nighttime photo, you can see a jackrabbit triggered it. So one of the most interesting things at looking at all the detections of wildlife and animal movement in this region so far is looking at what time of day these animals have actually been active. So here on this diagram, you can imagine that what we're most familiar with are the daytime hours from sunrise to sunset. There's a lot of visible light for us, and it's very easy and different. We can see different animals, especially with color, very readily when we're looking at these photographs. When the sun is actually below the horizon, the light environment is radically different. Now, I mentioned before, nocturnal animals are very well adapted to be able to see in this light environment. And so we've been partitioning the observations that we have in the darkest period of the 24-hour cycle to look at which animals are present during the night and also which animals are coming out when it's twilight. Twilight is the period of time when the sun is below the horizon, but there's some visible light getting into the sky. For the purposes of this study, we're using nautical twilight, which means when the sun is 12 degrees below the horizon until sunset, and then again after sunset until the sun has sunk another 12 degrees. So I'm going to share with you the observations of what we found at these different points of the day for the period of March, which is a really perfect time to be talking about this particular issue of when animals are most active, because we have equal amounts of daylight and night. Okay, well, first, just starting off with some of the favorite photos that I've seen in the study so far from daytime. This is a troop of white-nosed coati, and you're looking at baby juvenile coati. The females stay together and they raise their young together. And interestingly, when these animals were first documented by scientists, they thought that the males were a completely different species because they're larger and they're solitary. They're on their own in the environment except for certain parts of the year. Now we realize they're from the same species. These are relatives of raccoon and ringtail, and I'm going to talk about ringtail in a few minutes. But I just absolutely love this photograph. Often coati are up in trees, but we were lucky that they were playing in the grass, foraging for food in front of one of our cameras. We have seen a number of deer, and this is a beautiful male mule deer that walked in front of our cameras in the oak savanna. And we saw many, many bird species. That's one of the biggest surprises of this project, is how many birds we've detected on our cameras. For a number of years, Skyland Alliance has been using wildlife cameras to monitor which species are present in a place, but we've seen more birds in this study than we were expecting. And this is a northern harrier, just beautiful raptor that hunts in the grasslands during the day. At night, more deer. Here are two young bucks, white-tailed deer. Here's a female white-tailed deer. And I love this photo because in the far upper right-hand corner, you can see the lights of Nogales. And so you can just see the darkness between those city lights and where this doe was walking. Bobcats, one of my absolute favorite species. Here, this inquisitive cat was looking at the camera and then walked right up to the camera and took a selfie. We've seen javelina, just like I showed in the video from our home garden. A group of javelina is called a squadron, and here they are bristling as they move past the camera in the grass. And we've even had several mountain lion sightings as well. We just, from a photo taken yesterday, actually had a bat. So I had to throw that in today because it's so exciting. We got our first bat on our cameras. And then here are 4 of the species that we only found during the nighttime hours, during the true darkness. The upper left-hand corner is the ringtail. This is the relative of the white-nosed coati that we talked about in raccoon. And this is a species with really large eyes. It only comes out to hunt at night. And like its cousins, the coati, it goes up into trees and it actually can rotate its feet 180 degrees so that it can hang on to the tree as it climbs down head first. It's a really fun thing about ringtail. There are 4 species of skunk that live in this region, both northern Sonora and southern Arizona. Here's a beautiful picture of an all-black hooded skunk. We've had many observations of gray fox and, bottom right-hand corner, an American badger, the species that started my own personal obsession with nocturnal wildlife. So it's been really fun to have that animal join the study as well. So if we add up all the detections of wildlife species that we've had during this March period, what we find is that 31% of all of our animal detections happen during night. That's excluding the twilight period. And then another 6% of the observations were happening in twilight. And that is as the sun is approaching the horizon, and there's, just as a reminder, and some light, but often still visible stars in the sky if it's a clear day. 63% of our observations were during the day. Now, you'll notice I've put several photos, or 3 photos of birds in here. And the nighttime photo next to the skunk, that's a nightjar. Most of the bird species that we found actually are only out in the day. So if we exclude birds from this analysis and just look at the mammals, things shift quite a bit. And actually 46% of the animal observations that we had were happening during the darkest portion of the night, another 9% during twilight, and only 45% during the day. So if we combine night and twilight together, more than half of the animals are very highly active at night. So what does this tell me? This tells me that if we care about conservation of wildlife species, if we care about protecting the diversity of life in this region, we have to know who's there. And there's no way for us to do effective wildlife monitoring or develop conservation plans if we are not paying very close attention to which animals are out and about at night. And so we're really excited that we have the technology now to be deploying a large array of cameras. And with over 60 cameras deployed along 34 miles of the border, we're confident in the weeks and months ahead, we're going to be able to capture a majority of the wildlife diversity in this region. So just to close, bringing it back to my backyard, back to the Sonoran Desert, here next to Saguaro National Park. I think it's so important that we find little ways to connect to the nocturnal wildlife that's out and around us that we so often don't see. You can go and look for footprints if you've got sand or mud or a dirt road, dirt path around your house. Take out a ruler. If you find a track, you can take a photograph of it. You can submit it online to iNaturalist, and a community of naturalists will help you identify whose track that belongs to. It's a great low-tech way to figure out who might be living in your yard. Like I mentioned before, if you have a black light, you can go out and look for scorpions. It's not unique to the scorpions of the Sonoran Desert. You can do it in other places as well. And I really, really recommend you get on the bandwagon and join my obsession and get a wildlife camera. They're so fun to see what's out there when you're not looking. And I love what Amanda mentioned about doing a home lighting assessment, because that's one of the great ways that you can help make sure that your backyard is a healthy and happy place for wildlife, is by making sure that wildlife have access to the darkness that so many of them need to thrive. So thanks.
Thank you, Emily. That was so fun seeing all the pictures of the nocturnal mammals wandering around both on your property and also from the cameras. We've had some great questions, and I have a few questions too, and I'll just take a moment to let people know, if you're just joining, to please post your questions in the comment, or just say hello and let us know where you're tuning in from. I think I saw my dad give us a little hello, so shout out. Hi, Dad. So Emily, I'll start with a question that I have. You mentioned that, I think I added it up, about 51% of mammals are active at night in your study here in southern Arizona. Do you have any indication if that's true across most regions? Is it about half and half of when mammals and not animals are out exploring between day and night?
I think I don't have a sense yet of if what we've observed in March this year is reflective of ecosystems everywhere. I think this can be very affected by the particular light environment, and if there is light pollution in an area. I was really struck by what Travis Longcore was talking about this morning in terms of how animal populations can shift when they're active based on if there is light pollution. There's smaller windows for animals to be active if they must be in true darkness when there is a lot of light pollution, and animals that come out during the day come out earlier. So I think as our environment keeps changing and we are changing the light environment, I think those ratios are going to keep changing. And it'd be great to see if we can help protect those dark spots so that we can have many of the species that rely on darkness have adequate access to those places.
Yeah. So we have a question from Jay Page on YouTube, and he's asking about how to get more information about the cameras that you're using. And I'll just broaden that question and ask, for people who want to discover what's happening at night around their home or in places that they have access to, what's the best way for them to do that?
The best ways to put cameras out?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I really like the motion triggered cameras. They can be operational. You don't need to have it connected to any kind of cell service, or you don't need internet or anything like that. They just work off of batteries, and they can be taking photographs all of the time. So that's great for a more remote area. If you have a chance to put a camera out that, like I have next to our water bowl, we now have one that's plugged in, so it doesn't need batteries, and it actually sends me an alert every time it detects any kind of motion, which is probably really distracting when I'm in a meeting and I should be focusing on other things. But I get some alert and I look down and there's a bobcat that just came by, and it just stops everything. I do recommend, if you're in the market for looking for a wildlife camera, to visit trailcampro.com. They have supported us in finding the right cameras for our research with Skyland Alliance, and they do a lot of testing and comparisons that I think is really helpful. So they're a good source of information about which cameras could meet your particular interests and budget.
Great. Okay. A couple of questions about jaguars. Can you speak to the jaguar population in southern Arizona at all?
Well, jaguar is such a symbolic species for the environmental and conservation challenges we have down here. Jaguar, a century ago, they were living all the way up into the Grand Canyon, so much further north in the United States. But over time, they've been hunted out and excluded from large parts of southern Arizona. They're very well poised to make a recovery here, and the biggest threat at the moment to the recovery is the border wall construction that's going on the border.
Okay. Rowan Hartley wants to know what the advantages of being nocturnal are.
Well, here in the Sonoran Desert, because it does get so hot during the day, I looked at the weather and it looks like we're about to get our first 100-degree days. There are a lot of advantages for animals to be coming out so much later. And if they are out at night, it's cooler. And so they don't have to worry about overheating during the day. When you have many small animals that are coming out during the day, and if you're a predator, good time is to go out when the small animals are out. So if you eat rodents and they're out at night, you have to get up and stay up if you want to hunt them.
Those of us that live in hot climates like here in southern Arizona, and some people in other deserts across the world, can probably relate to wanting to be active at night when it's not quite so hot.
Definitely.
We have a question from Milo. I think Geraldine Wade posted it on behalf of Milo. Milo wants to know, which is your favorite animal that you've seen so far?
Well, I have to say, I think because completely started the obsession, it's the American badger. They're actually very rare down here. They need really wide patches of land without disturbance. They're rare in the national park that's next to us. So we feel very lucky that we've had one visiting. It came back over the last week, which was really exciting. So I think I just love seeing the American badger. But the videos of the tarantula, it might be a close second because it felt like something out of the movie Arachnophobia when I first saw the video of the tarantula walking along.
Yeah, it was pretty cool seeing it like kind of skitter through.
Yeah. And I love that it triggered the camera. That's awesome.
Yeah. Okay, we have time for a few more questions. So I'll toss you one here. James, age 5, wants to know, are some of the nocturnal desert animals that you've seen endangered? Or do you know of any that have become extinct?
Well, we're very concerned about the spotted cats here in Arizona. So we were talking about jaguar and ocelot, which is a smaller cat. It's a little bit bigger than a bobcat, but has a much longer tail. They're two of the subtropical species that do have breeding populations in Sonora, Mexico. But the sightings of them are infrequent now in southern Arizona. So we are working with volunteers and our partners at Sky Island Alliance to figure out how we can help protect their habitat, how we can help restore connectivity from places where they're doing well in Mexico so that they can come back up into the United States again. And one of the things that would help that the most right now is not having border wall construction built, which will just stop those cats in their tracks and not allow them to come back and repopulate Arizona.
Mm-hmm. Emily, one of the things that I enjoyed so much about your presentation and just your approach to wildlife conservation is the sense of curiosity that you bring to your work. You really have a lot of fun exploring what's out there and engaging and connecting with it. And it speaks to me a little bit about one of the concerns that we hear in our work, protecting the night from light pollution. So many people want and feel that they need light in their life because they're afraid of the dark. And I wonder if you can just speak a little bit about, do you think that there's an opportunity for people to tap into curiosity and become curious about what happens when we turn the lights off? Is that a way to encourage people maybe to start to explore working with that fear of the dark?
I can understand. I mean, I think we've all had experiences in our life where darkness felt scary. It's the unknown. And I think one of the most fun ways to approach it is just to get to know the darkness a little bit. I love sitting out any time of the day, but especially in the evening and once the sun's gone down and actually listening and looking at what is around. And I think if you've ever had an experience where you get to go camping or have done a night walk or some sort of night hiking, you realize how quickly our eyes actually adjust to the dark. In my former job, I did a lot of research at night, studying plants. And I was always amazed by how quickly I didn't need a flashlight or a headlamp, and I actually could navigate the landscape. We are also adapted to be out at night, and our eyes are amazingly capable of charting our path. And, getting to come across the type of animals that are out, or the excitement that maybe we will can be really fun way to go and explore the night.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks. So we have a question about a comparison of suburban activity to wild areas. So in other words, are nocturnal animals adapting to suburban or urban activity?
Well, I know there's been some research in species that are able to function in an urban environment. Coyotes are one of those species. Bobcats are actually pretty well adept at living around people as well. And I think those type of studies are ongoing. I think it's very likely that animals are adjusting their behavior based on the light environment. But there are also so many other factors that influence where animals are going and what they're doing there. Access to food, for water, and they're looking for each other. They're looking for members of the same species. So I think it's just important for us to realize that light is one of those really important factors that affects their ability to thrive, to look for food, water, and mates. And we can all do our part to make sure that light at night is not a barrier and breaking the connectivity for these species as they're trying to move from habitat to habitat.
We have a lot of questions just about that sort of topic about light and how it impacts nocturnal animals and their behavior. Can you speak a little bit about what adjustments you've seen? Have you seen animals adjusting their behavior because of a large amount of light at night?
Well, so far, where we've been doing our research down at the border, there isn't the addition of human-caused lighting in that environment, so it is a fairly dark place. But from my own experience and from what I've read, I think you can all imagine what lights do when you have them on inside your house. I'm always amazed if I leave a light in a room and the curtains were open and I come back and moths and all the insects are up against the glass. So they're a food source for larger animals. And you can imagine even just a small amount of light, if it's changing part of the food chain, there's a trickle down effect of that. And I know from road research that where animals are trying to cross the road, the type of lighting environment can make it either a friendly place for an animal to use a safe crossing for wildlife, like a culvert or an undercrossing under a highway. And if it's too bright, those animals will be repelled from that kind of crossing, and they'll actually flee and go the other direction.
That idea of connectivity is something that came up in the comments too. Just this concept that animals aren't just out looking for food all the time. They're also looking for each other and safe pathways to get to be able to move around safely. And so it's important for us to think about our behaviors and how we use light at night, and how that might interrupt that connectivity.
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely.
I guess we can maybe just close out. I wonder if you can tell us you mentioned a couple of different things, ways to engage with the night to discover nocturnal wildlife. You mentioned, maybe setting up a watering hole, talked a little bit about how to set up a camera, spoke about if you live in a climate where there's scorpions, using a UV light and going in and checking it out. Can you just close this out by telling us maybe your favorite moment in the dark?
Oh, my favorite moment in the dark. Well, I remember growing up as a kid and during the summers just reclining on my parents' driveway. And I remember growing up being able to see the Milky Way and just kind of staring up with the warm cement behind me and looking up at the stars and seeing bats going back and forth. And I feel personally like I lost my connection to the Milky Way, having moved to different areas. And I think as more and more light pollution was occurring different places, but coming out here to the desert now, I started seeing the Milky Way again more frequently. And that's such an awe-inspiring sight. I remember reading years ago that dung beetles use the Milky Way to know where to roll their dung balls. And it blew my mind. And it made me realize that animals are so attuned to what's happening at night. And most of us are not paying close enough attention, but we really have a chance to do that. And this series has been so fantastic to help us understand what to pay attention to and what we can do to help protect the night. So thank you.
Well, I love the full circle that you started your love of the night on a warm cement, looking up at the night sky and seeing the bats all overhead. And then today got to come and talk to us about some of the bats that you've studied and seen and the roles that they play in your life now. So thank you for being here. I'll just take a moment to plug some of the other presentations that are available today at idsw.darksky.org. Obviously, today's Earth Day, and we invite everyone to celebrate the life at night by visiting our schedule and checking out some of the other presentations. And if you have questions or comments about this program, about International Dark Sky Week, please shoot me an email. I'd love to hear your feedback. My email is amanda@darksky.org. I would be happy to hear what you're enjoying, how we can engage you and encourage you to take part in protecting the night from light pollution with us. Emily, it was Wonderful having you here. Thank you so much for sharing your curiosity and your love of the night and the great pictures of wildlife at night, giving us a little window into what happens while we're sleeping at night. We appreciate you being here.
Oh, so happy to be here. And people can ask me further questions if they'd like over email, emily@skyislandalliance.org. And if you want to follow my backyard camera obsession on Instagram, it's @TucsonEmily.
I follow your backyard camera obsession, and I really, really enjoy it. So I absolutely endorse that. Instagram @TucsonEmily, right?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right. Well, thank you all for being here. We appreciate you joining in. Another thank you to IDA's members and supporters that make this program possible. We hope you'll continue following along over the next couple of days for our virtual celebration of the night during International Dark Sky Week. Thanks again. Bye-bye.